So Mike Elko was speaking to some of his fellow Aggies, all right, to some of the Aggie constituents. And I got this from Carter Carrells, I believe is his name. He says Texas A&M coach Mike Elko, he was at the Brazos County A&M Club. And he said to the folks there in attendance, quote, "We are going to become the premier program in all of college football." Comes from Gig'em247 there.
All right. You guys are older than me, real quick. Rod, you're older than me. Coach, you're older than me. How many times have y'all heard an A&M coach say that exact same thing? Because I think I'm on coach number 4.
I know Sumlin was on, but Sumlin actually had a reason because he had Johnny, and so maybe Summy was closer than most with it. I definitely remember hearing it from Summy. Yeah. Yeah, at least twice. Jimbo. So Jimbo did it too. So that's at least 2 I can think of in my time that I remember saying it. I'm sure RC might have said it to somebody. I just can't remember. I don't have the receipts. Yeah, I mean, listen. First of all, he's talking to his people, so them his people. So that's a family quote that got out. But I've always said the Aggies have program dysmorphia. They see their program as very different than it actually is, or how it has naturally perceived. They see it differently. And nothing wrong with that. I think there's a little bit of we see Longhorns to a little bit of burnt orange glasses. There's no doubt about that. But I think the Aggies have severe program dysmorphia. And going to become the premier program in all of college football, start with the state. That's what I'll give Mac Brown credit for. Mac Brown gave the state of Texas a lot of credit. He used to have a state championship. He did. And people think it was silly. Hell, I thought it was silly at the time. But now that I'm older and a little wiser, I actually see the genius behind it, Coach, because his state title was simply this: you never lose a game in the state of Texas. Then you're state champion, right? If you don't lose a game, because you don't play all the best teams in the state via Big 12. You'll play Baylor and play Tech and all that. But it also included Texas OU. You played in the state of Texas. Can lose any home games. And he used to take a lot of pride in like that state championship and talked about that. And I think for the Aggies, hell, man, just try. And of course, it counted beating the Aggies. That was a big part of it. Being, the best program in the state of Texas. They should start there. And hell, that'll give you, if you can be the best program in the state, considering where Texas is, that's a hell of a place to be. I mean, you're already going to be considered a top 10, top 5 program right there. So I know they don't want to go there because they look at their program, their program, like I said, in a different light than most. But I think they got to start with, how about a double-digit win season? Let's start there. Why did just talk about winning 10 games, right? Last time they did that was when Johnny was there? All right, let's just start. Let's do baby steps here. That's all. Baby steps. And I guess Mike Elko, he's talking to his people, so he's got to get them hyped up. But man, behind closed doors, I bet he's thinking more baby steps. We got to get to a certain point before we can start challenging on that. Hell, get to the college football playoff. That'd be great. Yeah. The expanded one. Get there. That should be the goal for the Aggies. The Aggies are, I think, perfectly capable. Not perfectly. Wrong words. They are capable of making the college football playoff if it expanded. They are.
Yeah. I mean, look, this might be a long-winded metaphor, but they have all the ingredients, right? If you're baking a cake, you got to make sure you have everything. And I've never baked a cake, but I know you need flour. I know you need sugar, right? Milk, I think, and eggs. Am I on the right track here? That you need some of those ingredients. At least I know for sure some of those ingredients. A&M has a lot of ingredients, right? The facilities, they got NIL, they're in the conference, right? They're kind of one of those premier Adidas programs too, so they get the backing from their, apparel sponsor, if you will. They have ingredients, yet they rush the process. And I think this is another example. They want that cake to be made in about 5 minutes. And they know that you got to beat the eggs, you got to swirl it around in the shirt. I don't know how to make a cake, fellas, if y'all couldn't pick me up here, but the point is they skip the process of what those ingredients should be building for and just look straight to the result. So like you said, Rod, I went through what was that last was it 10-win season? You're right. It was 2012. And that's when they had a Heisman, a transcendent quarterback with Johnny Manziel. Since then, they've had 5 losses, 6 losses, 7, 4, 1 in 2020, COVID year. Good year, 9-1. And then they had 5, 4, 6, 5, 5, 5, 4. So you're averaging what, 5 losses a year over the last 15 seasons.
Yeah.
You're talking about being the most premier program in all of college football. Hey, let's kind of fine tune what these goals are first. I like the big picture. You want to build a nice, shiny, tasty cake, but make sure that your processes are checked off before getting to that process or to that end result.
Yep. I agree. Like start by let's go undefeated at home. Like, we don't want to lose any home games. Let's start with trying to get to the SEC title game. So I just think a little bit, some realistic goal for the Aggies.
Make a muffin. Yeah.
Make a muffin. Yeah, you can't make a cake. Make a muffin. I do remember when Charlie Strong said the cake was baked for Tom London.
See?
Tom, how'd that coach? You remember when Charlie said that the cake was baked? You had the ice. What happened to that? I guess it wasn't what he didn't know how to bake a cake. Is what he was like CJ. What's going on with that? Cake was baked.
HEB got cakes, man.
HEB got cakes.
Well, yeah. And A&M tried that. They tried to buy one. They tried to buy a championship. It didn't work.
Good point.
But I think there's a couple of things there. First of all, when you look at the state of our program when Sark came in, about the same shape that A&M is in. I mean, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it can be done. Are their donors tired of hearing this same old, and having to dish out all that money, to make Jimbo go away? Yeah. And now you got a guy making these kind of statements, and if you don't have the money behind it, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. But there's two things. I don't know if Mike Elko is that guy. I think he's a good guy. But does he have that in today's recruiting world? You've got to have that aura around you. You've got to be a recruiter. You got to be a guy that kids love being around and all that stuff. And he just, I've never met the man, but he just doesn't project himself that way, as a confident recruiter, a guy that's going to go in and sell himself to these young players and to their families and all those things. I don't know. And then the other thing is that you're fighting that Sark didn't have to fight. Sark has Austin to take kids out in when they come to town. Yep. In College Station, you're always going to have to go home to College Station. And so they have that against them. Of course, they, like everybody, they try to make that into, a positive thing. In other words, we're more laid back. You don't have all the crazy stuff going on in this town, and Austin is weird, but it seems to be working, having the city of Austin behind you, and then having a coach who is a player's coach, who is an elite recruiter. And not only that, he surrounded himself with a staff that is like, there's not a chink in their armor. What if there's a shortfall in the staff, where's it at? If somebody's holding us back on the staff, I don't know where it is. I mean, our players are being developed. Our players are they're doing everything right, and they're getting the transfer portal guys, and they're doing everything right. And I don't know that Elko has that kind of staff put together. But it can be done at A&M. I don't think there's any doubt it can be done there at some point in time. I just don't know if he's the guy. But
yeah. The last thing I wanted to bring up, and Coach, I think you made a great point about whether or not the backing has kind of been met with fatigue. Travis Brown of KBTX Sports out in Bryan College Station area, he made a report earlier of where the donor, you have to report your donations for public universities. Since that 2022 season, Matthew, I sent you that little graphic. Since 2022, their donations in the last 2 years have decreased $50 million from $135 million to $85 million. So I I mean, on top of having to pay, we've talked about the graphic of coaches having to depart and having to pay those salaries off. You see that contributions level diminish, right? It took that massive jump up almost by $100 million from 2021 to 2022, but it's coming back down to earth. And I think that some of those folks who provide the big donations and contribute a lot to universities are probably sitting around saying, we're doing the same song and dance, just with a different price. And I don't know. Fatigue hits everybody at some point.
That's a good point. I think we know the Aggies got the resources and money. That ain't their problem. All right. And honestly, they get talent. Talent's not the biggest issue. And we remember here at Texas when money, resources, and talent was not Texas' biggest issue either.
Yeah.
And though they may not want to admit it, they're right now this kind of lull for their program. I think actually they have a lot in common with Texas when Texas was going through their lull. I think it's a culture issue. I think it's a coaching issue. Maybe development. Texas was definitely development. Those are the three big issues that Sark had to solve: coaching, culture, and development when Texas got here. But the Aggies are getting talent on campus. There's no question about that, and they have the resources. I think culture and coaching, getting back to Coach's points, have been their biggest issues. And like I said, and maybe it's development. They still put guys in the league. Still putting guys in the league at a pretty damn good rate, considering they're not winning a ton of games.
Yeah.
So that's like Texas rivals right now. Texas is in kind of the catbird seat with their rivals because they're all struggling to deal with the changing landscape of college sports. The Aggies can't figure out their culture with it, and they can't find the right coach that can give them a program identity. Like that's really tough. They can't. And you recruit to that identity, right? As part of, and you build the brand around that identity. The Sooners are just having a tough time keeping up because they just ain't got the cash. Like Texas they just ain't got enough sugar daddies and sugar mamas and enough cash flow. It's just that simple. The Aggies got plenty of cash flow. Aggies they can spend money all day, any day with everybody. But they ain't got the culture. And with that cash flow, as Longhorn fans know, you can have a lot of toxicity come along with that. You can be recruiting the wrong kind of players with that kind of cash flow, bringing in guys who are here for the wrong reasons on campus and not the right reasons. And that's the challenge for Sark. That's why Sark always talks about culture and talks about looking for the signs that they're compatible and signs that they're going to be compatible with the culture and that they're respectful teammates and good teammates and that he doesn't lead with NIL because he believes you lead with NIL, that can end up leading you down kind of the wrong path in recruiting. So I think for the Aggies, they got to figure out the coaching, the culture, and hiring the right coach and figure out all that. But I think those are their two biggest issues. But I'm now on the inside. I'm not an Aggie, so I couldn't tell you firsthand.